It's good to see you again. Welcome to the program. I'm Felicity Ezewuike. Now, corruption is a silent thief that drains resources and undermines development. According to the United Nations, many of the world's numerous challenges, tragedies, inequalities, and injustices are tied to corruption. Corruption drains an estimated $10 billion annually from African economies, diverting crucial resources from healthcare, education, and infrastructure development. The scale of these illicit financial flows undermines economic growth and erodes public trust in institutions across the continent. It permeates every facet of our lives, and the fight towards tackling it seems humongous. But it is a task that must be done, however long it takes. To draw attention to this, every year on December 9th, since 2003, there is a global observance dedicated to encouraging preventive action. Youth Central joins the fray on one slot today to discuss the youth-centric 2024 theme, Uniting with Youth Against Corruption, Shaping Tomorrow's Integrity. This year's focus acknowledges the critical role of young people in combating corruption and fostering a culture of accountability and transparency. My guests for this conversation are Demola Bakare, spokesperson, ICPC. He joins us from Abuja. We also have Murkthar Suleiman. He's the communications officer, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. Gentlemen, thank you very much for giving us your time. Do we have Demola on?
Thank you for having us.
Oh, fantastic. All right, let me start with you. What is the significance of International Anti-Corruption Day, and how does it relate to Africa's anti-corruption efforts? Because I do know that Africa has its own Anti-Corruption Day.
Yes, you are right. Africa Anti-Corruption Day holds on July 7 every year. But the International United Nations own holds December 9th every year. And the significance of the days is such that it's calling attention to the menace of corruption. And it's not to celebrate it, but to call attention to it so that people, the awareness will be there in order to be able to galvanize actions towards resolving the problem.
All right.
I mean, you in your prologue, you have said, I mean, the damage that corruption has done to Africa, to our development, is enormous. And every hand has to be on deck in order to be able to resolve, what the problem we have with corruption.
Murkthar, if you can hear me, just to confirm that you can actually hear me. Good evening again.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. Talk to us about...
Yes, good evening. I can hear you.
Okay, great. Talk to us about corruption and how it affects African economies. Maybe you could focus on some of the common forms of corruption that you find on the continent. Murkthar.
All right, thank you very much again for having me. It's always a pleasure to also be in this program together with the ICPC. ICPC is one of our key partners, the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Program, which the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance is actually implementing in Nigeria. But just to come to your question, the problem of corruption in Africa in general has actually been a serious issue that has actually bedeviled the continent for a very long time, from illicit financial flow to the proliferation of small arms and a tortuous amount of issues that we've actually had to have. And the most painful part of all of this is that the human angle part of corruption efforts actually takes the brunt of the issues more than actually the systemic issues, because we cannot talk about the issues in abstract as though that there are no humans who play their part in it. And this has through the years forced us to grow retrogressively. So we're not growing progressively; we've been growing backwards as a continent, and this is actually a very bad thing. So like what this year's theme for International Anti-Corruption Day is about is to see how we can then stop the successiveness of corrupt practices, find a way to talk to young people, and then ensure that those corrupt practices that have been in existence before can actually stop now and not get people who get to continue these processes.
Demola, what progress, if any, has Africa made in fighting corruption? I mean, you are in that space, so you would have some idea, particularly since the adoption of the UN Convention Against Corruption in 2003.
Yeah, the progress that we have made is that sufficient attention have been called to the issue of corruption in Africa and in our different countries. For instance, in Nigeria, since 2000, when the law that established ICPC was promulgated, we started the three-pronged action against corruption. The three-pronged action includes the enforcement, where we receive petition from members of the public, and we investigate and we prosecute if we are able to establish prima facie case. The second mandate is for us to be able to prevent corruption from happening at all, and that we do through the instrumentalities of system studies and review, where we advise MDAs and government establishment generally on the ways and manner to prevent corruption. And the third aspect of that is public mobilization. We educate Nigerians and we solicit their support, because 1001 agencies of government cannot resolve the problems of corruption. And that we have done successfully using the three our main approaches: enforcement, prevention, and public mobilization. And to that extent that we have started, I think is commendable. Not that we have, because we are still, I can say categorically that we are still scratching the surface, but we have started and we are making incremental progress every year.
All right, let me jump off what you said. I'm paraphrasing now. You're saying no matter the amount of agencies we have, fighting corruption is a collective thing. Murkthar, take that on and just talk to us about how the young people are becoming increasingly invested in the fight against corruption and what role they have played so far.
I think it's very important to note that there has been some significant awareness in the side of the young people. With the social media proliferating in the society and information flow has been very easy and seamless, people are getting to see things that are actually not good for our polity. It's also, at this point, it's also important to point out that it is good politics and good policies that brings about good governance. And the more and more young people learn how to get involved in the politics in a clean way. Politics is not a dirty game the way people always portray it to be. It can be a clean game if it is played by the right set of people. Like Alan Smith once said, it is so unfortunate that those who can run the countries are busy cutting hair and driving cabs. So if you know you're actually good enough to stand in the forefront, because real meaningful change that affects human lives are made from positions that have political processes in them. So we cannot say we don't want to get involved. Young people need to be a part of that process. We need to drive that process. You need to register for a political party. You need to get engaged in public service. You cannot leave it to anybody else. Nigeria is the only country that we have. And because of how far we've seen, that we've seen a lot of significant change in the polity, especially if you look at the way the NSAS protest started in 2020 and the 2023 general elections. We're beginning to see more people get involved in that process. We're beginning to see more people call out corrupt practices, corrupt practices in public service on Twitter, and we're seeing sometimes that the judiciary actually takes these things up, or the House of Reps, the members takes this thing up and see how they can investigate these issues and find lasting solutions. And also the agencies that are in charge of enforcing, like the ICPC and the EFCC, have been doing tremendous job over the past for some time now. And we're hoping that they can keep up the pace. We're hoping that these things can be nipped in the bud. We know that the corruption issues have actually borne fruits and actually had deep roots in the country already as it stands, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we cannot do anything about it. If we start, we have to start where we are. So once we start where we are, we can find our way through and how to solve these issues.
Demola, I'm curious as to your view on this year's theme of uniting with youth against corruption. What role have they played for you at ICPC, and how do you think they can show more commitment to the fight against corruption?
Yeah, in the past, in the immediate past, the Nigerian youths have been taken as a stakeholder in the fight against corruption. I think it is time now, and we have decided that they are no longer stakeholders. They are partners in the fight against corruption. And that is the way to go. That is what we have decided that we are going to do henceforth. So it's very timely. The theme of this year's commemoration of International Anti-Corruption Day is very apt. And I say this with knowledge of hindsight. The National Anti-Corruption Strategy spoke eloquently about involving stakeholders. And from that angle, we have our own strategic action plan too that speaks directly to the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. In the last 20 years or so, we have streamlined our structure because we know that we need to educate our youth in values and morals. We have a dedicated unit in ICPC that is ethics and value. We have a dedicated unit at the ICPC where we have youth empowerment and mobilization. So we have taken the issue relating to the youth very seriously at ICPC. In our educational outreaches, we have taken them seriously. We have clubs in primary schools and secondary schools. We have anti-corruption vanguards in tertiary institutions, and we engage with them even after education, after their tertiary education. We have outreach to the NYSC. So every segment of the Nigerian youth have been involved in the anti-corruption crusade. Even children, Nigerian youth that are outside of the university, out of school children, they are involved. We have outreaches at the grassroots.
All right, Demola, let me
people in the marketplace, road workers.
All right, let me shift the conversation a bit, and just I'm sure our international viewers will be curious as to what the ICPC actually does for Nigeria, and what work you've done, as briefly as you can, the criticism that you faced, and the response that the agency has given to these criticisms.
Repeat, what are the criticisms?
So I'm just asking you, talk to us about what ICPC does and what criticism you have faced for the work that you do. And maybe you give us an instance of the response that the agency gave to the criticism or feedback on your work.
In the time past, some people will accuse ICPC, for instance, of being a toothless bulldog, that we just bite. We just bark, we don't bite. And I think Nigerians know better now, Because if you get, that arose from our style. We do not go after you for entertainment purpose. We go after the corrupt people to do real business. We dig hole around them so that whichever way they move, they fall into the trap, and we prosecute. Those that are falling victims of corruption and that we have investigated and prosecuted can say that, okay, we do our work with a lot of integrity. We do not compromise on the quality of work that we do. So the criticism of being a toothless bulldog has long since died. People now know, people know better now. With the idea that, well, you are doing, a lot of work, yet the corruption issue is increasing. And I beg to disagree a little bit. Yes, we hear so much more about, corruption issues, because of the social media, because of the awareness that has been created. It's not as if it's increasing, and even if it is increasing, there is no data to suggest that it's on the increase. But we are not relenting, and it has become clearer to Nigerian people that yes, the anti-corruption agencies, especially ICPC, they are not relenting. They are doing the work that they're supposed to do, even though a lot more, still needs to be done.
All right,
so
Murkthar.
The criticisms are giving way to engagement. Not people do not antagonize us the way they used to do, but they are engaging with us so that we do all society approach together.
All right.
All of society approach to fighting corruption. That is what we do.
All of society's approach. I like that phrase, and I guess that's more the reason why the UN has chosen the theme for this year. Murkthar, in what specific ways can young people be more involved in the anti-corruption fight? Do they wait to be encouraged to join? You did say something about participating in politics, but beyond that, how can they be more involved?
I think it's very important for us to understand that Nigeria is for all of us, and it takes a village to raise a child, they said. And in this case, it takes a village for all of us to be able to make Nigeria a better place, for it to be residential for each and every one of us. There are such things as unsolicited obligations that you can actually do. Sometimes situations, acts of by simply just removing a stone from the road so that somebody does not stumble on it, to as big as whistleblowing, are actually very small actions or very major actions that we can take. We don't necessarily have to wait until we have to show a very grand gesture for us to show that, or for us to be able to report someone, for us to see how we can save the face of Nigeria. And that thing that I think we need to do as a country is to also always find a way to ensure that we follow the proper protocols in everything that we are doing. So the ambivalence that we have toward the judicial system, however founding you might find it on your own, from your own point, it's also very important to note that these systems are there to ensure that there's a clinical dispensation of justice across all ramifications of Nigeria. And these are things that we've not really embraced very well. I wouldn't say that it is not entirely well-founding, but of course, the more and more we utilize the system, the better and better it will get. So I think more Nigerian youth needs to learn to trust the system as well, need to also learn needs to also learn their personal unsolicited obligations to their countries, and also learn what their rights are and how to enforce those rights.
I suppose in the course of your work, you've had to have some interaction with civil society organizations and the private sector. How do you think that they can contribute to the anti-corruption efforts, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa?
I think if we want to go into the organized private sector, one of the best place to start is procurement. I think for most organizations or established institutions in Nigeria, if we can get procurement right, at least for a start, it becomes a bit easier for us to move forward. So make your processes transparent. If you have a policy, follow the policy to the letter, and also encourage people to follow those processes, reward good behavior. It is quite unfortunate how good behavior is not like a bad thing in Nigeria, and bad behavior is not like the hip thing. We need to find a way to let people understand that reporting corrupt officers or reporting corrupt persons in my institution is not a bad thing. It is not a crime. And it should be something that we should all embrace, because we want Nigeria to be better, and it starts from each and every one of us. That thing they say, charity begins at home. It is the small actions that we take that translate into the butterfly effects to big changes that we see at national level. So we cannot expect miracle to happen, or that things will just on their own we'll just snap our fingers and things are just going to fall into place. That's not how it works. So those small actions that we need to take from our own small places, those are our one organization, one institution at a time. That's one way that we're going to climb.
All right, Demola, let me come to you, and this time it's about agenda setting, really. The time for this conversation is usually very short, so there's not much we can do other than, look for solutions in the midst of our conversation, and that is why I'm going to ask, what are some of, or should be, the key priorities for Africa's anti-corruption agenda in the next decade, and how do you think we can better measure progress?
Thank you so much for this question. When my colleague mentioned that attention should be paid to procurement, it is because he knows that corruption in procurement is huge. But that is only if you take the pecuniary view of corruption. Corruption is not only pecuniary. Corruption can be moral. But in fact, the mother of all corruption is the moral corruption. Because the process of procurement will be corrupted if you are morally corrupt. If you are dishonest, there is no way that you can execute procurement, process that is honest, that is tidy, that will not be corrupt. So the foundation is to emphasize ethics and values, is to emphasize integrity of our processes. And that is to reorientate the mindset of the people, that we need to do collective fight against corruption, to educate the mindset of the people, to know that fighting corruption is not just about pecuniary. It's not just about about people that steals money. There is corruption in the moral sector. Sexual harassment, for instance. Sexual harassment is huge, and it happens against Nigerian youth most of the time. So what I'm saying in essence is that, yes, let's go to the root cause of corruption. The root of corruption is the dishonesty of the people in government, dishonesty of the followership. Dishonesty of the followership as well as the leadership. Okay. But if everybody comes back to the basis and we begin to practice honesty, we begin to practice integrity, then we will get our processes right. All right, Demola,
we're almost out of time.
Because we are going to execute whatever with integrity.
We're almost out of time. Murkthar, you have about 40 seconds, so if you could just speak to that subject. What should be our agenda as briefly as possible? And then maybe a one-liner, a message you would like to convey to not just the leaders, but citizens on the observance, of this International Anti-Corruption Day.
I think I agree with my senior colleague over there when he said moral corruption is one of the most biggest decadence that we've had in our society currently. I think we need to also find a way to ensure that even from the homes, there are certain behaviors that should not be excused. And parents should be able to teach their children that actions and inactions have consequences. And however we think that these actions and inactions have just consequences on us, these actions and inactions create consequences that create ripple effects that also affect our neighbors and then the country at large. It is very important for us to know that the deliberate steps that we take toward any direction that we are doing has ripple effect that affects everybody else around us and also our children that are yet to come. It is very important that we live a very fair society. As the new Nigerian national anthem says, we want to leave the country, we want to leave a flag without stain to our children as we grow as a nation.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for giving us your time. We appreciate the insights you've provided.